because eventually if you do take drugs that don't combine together, you started doing more drugs and drugs and drugs and drugs and drugs and drugs. That should be like a freaking like a thing, drugs and drugs and drugs and drugs.
Meme it. It started here.
Let's start it here right now. I actually agree with those as well. We are actually talking about trend. Just gonna add a little bit on there. The risk and rewards on taking tren on an off season, or even like if you're prepping for a show, it's just not worth it. Just diet right, train right, and then you can take other stuff to kind of like to produce the exact same result. But at the end of the day, like tren is don't get me wrong, it's a great drug. It's really good, but you probably don't need it as much as you think you do.
I mean, I like it for like a short little bit of time in prep. If you're taking a trend for a long period of time in prep, like 12 weeks, like a lot of people are doing, you're gonna like hate your life. It's too many progesterone issues and side effects that come into account. Think of gear as like the nitric oxide that they're pressing in Fast and Furious to get through the end of the race. That's what
That's
you
what
should be
fun
using
is.
it for.
Yeah.
That's the analogy I always use. Use
Mm.
it to get through that finish line
Yep.
as fast as you can.
Yep. That's a pretty good way to put it, actually. um, this is a interesting question that I actually myself just learned a little bit more. That yeah, we don't know much. Back in the early 2000s, 2010, people just tell you to do this amount, and you're like, okay, cool, I'll just do that amount. But and realistically, you don't need to start at such a high amount. But the question I'm going to that I was kind of going off a tangent with was how much do you use for a first cycle, and do you monitor whether to increase or decrease?
Want me to answer that?
I could answer this one actually. Um, Back in the younger days when I was in like the forums and
Okay.
stuff like that, there were always like some guys just like, yeah, man, take 500 milligrams of test and then like some D-ball and you're good. And I'm just like, okay, because we didn't know any better. We'd have no idea like what to properly use for that first cycle. And that we started such a high, ridiculous amount of PEDs when we could have just started like a lower dose. Like think of I've just learned this myself recently, but think of using PEDs as your training. When you're somebody who's new into training, you don't want to start with like 50 sets your first time working out. Not a good idea. So, in terms of using PEDs, you start as low as you can possibly go, like what is it, minimum effective dose that you can
Least common denominator. Yeah.
yeah, that you can use and that could be effective for you to make progress. And then gradually over time, you kind of titrate up slowly and slowly based on how everything else is good. And once you checked all those markers, it's, I kind of just thought about this recently, like as I was saying, it's progressive overload. Eventually, how you train, if you train with two sets, you're going to have to slowly, gradually titrate different little things in your routine, like your intensity, how much food you're getting, how much recovery you're getting, how much stress that you're handling, stuff like that. And then once those all completely checked out the marketer and they're good and you're making progress that way, you don't need to do anything. You don't need to increase. You don't need to decrease. But like once you realize that, like, oh, I'm not making progress, you check those markers off, and then you slowly increase the dose to a certain amount to produce more gains, and then you keep on staying at that particular dose and then keep on again titrate everything, whether your sleep, rest, and recoveries are all good, and then you slowly move up and so forth. Eventually, if you do this method, it will take a long time versus somebody who does like a shitload of gear, but it's all about health, and it's all about doing it long term and being able to maintain a really good health panel. And that's kind of all it is. So definitely start as low as you possibly can get away with, and then fix your diet, nutrition, and everything. And then once you feel like that all those things are completely checked off, then you can slowly move up. And then after that, you repeat the exact same process again, check everything off the marker, and then so forth. And then that's pretty much it. What do you think?
Yeah, that was a really good way to explain it because I do agree with what you just said. Yeah, forms back in the day they say 500 to 600 milligrams usually of test is perfectly fine. Some people say D-ball. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of orals. I just recommend kind of staying away from it. I'm sure if you're dabbling and stuff, you're gonna eventually dabble with it, and that's it is what it is. But just understand that methylated drugs or oral steroids do have more side effects than injectable, and it doesn't get filtered the same way. Now, that being said, is yeah, I think 500, 600 milligrams, which is what people were recommending back in the day, probably a good starting place. I mean, you don't really need to, you're going to have an anabolic factor out of it. Even though testosterone is technically not anabolic, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Um, you're going to get results. And if you blow your load on your first cycle ever, and you're taking like test trend mast,
Oh,
throw some oral steroids in there too. Where do you go from there? You don't. Now, one thing I can say when it comes to like blowing your load on something like that is like if you just stayed on like TRT for a year and you weren't running gear, then all of a sudden like you ran an anabolic cycle, like you added an anabolic in there. Oh my gosh, are you going to have results? Let that androgen receptor rest. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, 3 months off, jump back in. 3 months off, jump back in. Well, I'm coming from, I had a surgery a year ago to not being able to run really pretty much anything. Then all of a sudden I was running stuff going into a show. People were like, holy shit, you're growing like crazy. You're leaning out. Like, how are you doing that? I'm like, because I'm not running big cycles in the off season. My receptors are generally pretty fresh. So you blow that load when you need to. I mean, I hate using the blowing your load, but whatever. Oh, that's what I say. I mean, like that's essentially what it is. Like you've got like a fresh androgen receptor, take advantage of it. Then let it get healed up and refreshed and make sure that it's receptive and hit it again, but just don't give it the time off that it needs.
yeah, exactly. Best advice for cutting drugs for men's physique. Yeah, I'm not touching this one. You go ahead.
All right, cool. I mean, I can tell you what every single person in the industry pretty much uses right now off the top of my head. Everyone's pretty much using the same drugs. They use different dosages and they run their cycles a little bit differently. But what I hate this question because like if we're talking about pro level, they're running the same gear. They might be running different dosages of growth hormone and insulin, and that's about where it differs. Some people are taking too much gear, like we talked about, but the genetically blessed ones are all pretty much running the same stuff. You're going to be looking at like test trend mast, and then you're going to be looking at orals differ per coach, obviously, but you're going to be looking at like proveron for sure. A lot of people like Anavar, which I don't think the risk, not the risk versus reward, but the reward from it's not really there. It gets very expensive, but it plays a role. Winstrol is another drug. Halotestin sometimes people use, but it's very, very toxic. Winstrol is relatively toxic as well. And probably missing a few, but that's generally what people are running. And like I said, they're just running it pretty much the same exact dosages. But if you're physique, you're just built for physique. If you're classic, you're built for classic. If you can move up into open, you move up into open. The issue that we've seen in the past is when people are pushing so many drugs that they're forcing themselves into open. And that's the reason why we have classic physique now, is because people are forced to go up into open or forced to go into physique. And they were having to either hold back their bodies or push their bodies instead of like someone like, trying to think of someone that I know, like whenever Keon Pearson, right? Natural and classic physique for a while, extremely dominant, and then moves up into 212, right? He's going to eventually move up into open. I'm just using a genetic freak for an example.
I
And
like you, Keon, because you're so good at this.
huh?
I don't like Keon because you're so good at this.
Yeah, I mean, he's like a brother of mine, man. Like we're so tight with each other. But he's going to be the example. I mean, he's someone that would have started off in physique and then he moved into classic and then he moved into 212 and then he can move into open. Why? Because his body wants to grow.
Yeah, he's a
The drugs aren't going to change. I mean, I'm going to say that the first two divisions he was in, he was natural and he was doing well in until he ran a little bit going into the New York Pro and the Olympia. Very little bit. Like what he was running, people wouldn't even consider a cycle. It was a little bit of I'm not even going to talk about it, but it was so low, like it didn't even have testosterone in it.
I'm so mad. That makes me so mad.
He's crazy genetics,
Like,
and he doesn't need a lot, and he can go very far. So the drugs are relative. Okay, now I want to close it out. The drugs are relatively the same across the board: physique, classic, and bodybuilding. Just depends on where your body's going to fall. And unless if you abuse drugs to force yourself into a division that you should not be in, which I would never recommend to anyone, you're just fall where your genetics are going to let you fall.
Good. Perfect. That's definitely well said. Again, I'm just gonna add a little bit of advice there. Is you can't outdrug a bad diet. Um, realistically, the reason why PEDs work so well is because it needs nutrients to work. So if you don't have the right nutrients and the right stimulus towards building up hypertrophy or even trying to cut down, I mean, they're going to work to a certain point, but you want to make sure to use them to the best of their abilities. And that is your body need nutrients in terms of like getting lean, getting dry or whatever. That all comes over a certain period of time of consistently diet and adding cardio, weight training, some PEDs, but definitely food. I feel like I'm repeating everything that everybody else ever says, and people are gonna get so upset. But like, food is key. It makes you grow because when you use PEDs, your PEDs need nutrients to be able to absorb into the muscle, and then that's how you recover to be able to lift again, to be able to lose the weight and fat and stuff like that. And there's all these different cosmetic effects that happens based on what you use, but ultimately, the factor that decides how you're going to look with the help of PEDs is food.
Yeah. So let me, I want to go back to the original question because it was cutting drugs, right? I
Yeah.
hate when people use cutting drugs. These aren't fat burners. These are steroids. They don't help you burn body fat. They might increase your metabolic rate, which in turn technically helps you be able to eat the same amount of food. And technically you're burning more calories in a day. The main drug that I'm thinking of is Tren. It boosts your T3 levels up, which is
Mm.
active thyroid. And that being said, is it helps you cut down, but it doesn't burn body fat. It's not like clenbuterol or ephedrine or caffeine. Like caffeine actually is technically partially a fat burner. So that being said, is understand that steroids are not fat burners. So do not ask what steroids take to burn body fat because that answer is a very poor question to ask. It means that you know nothing about the subject. Not putting anyone down, but I just want to because he didn't ask that. I just wanted to reiterate that steroids aren't meant. Steroids are to retain muscle and to give you a certain physiological appearance on stage. So okay.
Yeah. And we're going a little bit more in depth with this because we honestly want to give you guys the legit answer that you're looking for. Like, I think there are so many individuals out there who give out like who do these, but they don't really like tell you like the good part that's good for your health and these other factors and why you should and shouldn't do this. And then at the end of the day, it all comes down to the exact same thing. We just generally want to make you have good decisions and not hurt yourself long term, especially for the younger guys around like 16, 18. And it's like, we just want to help you guys and hopefully eventually change your mind not to do this.
Their hormones are so ridiculously high. And like that's an issue. I hear so many 16-year-old kids. Hey, what do you think about this drug? What do you think about this drug? I'm like, I literally sat there and I actually yelled at someone one day and I was like, stop asking me. Diet and train. I see him train every single day horribly.
Hmm.
Like I was like, bring a logbook in, start tracking your numbers, hit it hard, and crush it. And eat. It's like, and he's 16 years old and he's taking PEDs. Oh, what do you think about this? Oh, I already ordered it. I'm taking this already. I'm like,
Yeah, that's
why?
pretty okay. It's just like,
So okay, yeah,
yeah.
continue. That
All right,
that was
next
weird.
question. Average cycle for a female not on birth control, off season and into show, national level figures or wellness
Wait, so average cycle.
for a female not on birth control.
So I'm guessing that's length of a cycle
Possibly.
or drugs. Okay, I can talk about drugs and so first off, a lot of female competitors are taking too many and sometimes too much of the wrong drugs. The only drugs that I think like steroid wise that are actually like relatively in the vicinity of being okay is probably Anavar and Primo. I'm
Mhm.
not going to talk about dosages or anything like that, but um, a lot of females take like Winstrol, for instance, which I think is too harsh of a drug. I've seen females take Mass. I've seen females take EQ. I've seen females take Tren. I see a really common one of NPP. These drugs I don't think are. I would never ever recommend to a female to take them personally because I've seen it just instantly change people. And if you don't like immediately come off, then you have permanent damage for the rest of your life. Vocal cords change, clitoris enlargement, hair falling out, stuff like that. I mean, hair falling out you can reverse, but so as far as length of the cycle, I like off season 8 weeks, on season 8 weeks, and then reset the androgen receptor. Females their androgen receptors are so sensitive compared to males. You need such a little amount, and it goes such a long way. So it's different than a male, because we're pumping out testosterone naturally. So we're meant to, like, we are always hitting that androgen receptor. A little bit different than females. Like females, if you're lucky, you have like a 50 to 100 test score, right? And that's like 100 would be phenomenal if you're a female and you had it. Whereas a male, you want to be sitting between like 700 to 900 if you're lucky. So that gives you a general idea of androgen receptors and how much testosterone we produce on blood.
Perfect. I think we covered this, but we'll just to get them out the way. Coming completely off versus TRT doses till next cycle. Benefits and cons of the two.
Covered it.
Covered it. It's already on there. And this one's most effective compound during off season for women to grow optimal muscle.
Again, the only one that I think is like the harshest one to take for a female that I think is where you're not going to have drastic side effects, probably primobolan. And I think I covered the length of time and everything like that. I wouldn't mess around with NPP or like any of the other drugs that I listed before.
And the question that she asked is also the same. What do you think? What do you reckon is the most effective compound for women with less side effects? Reckon. What do you reckon?
Again, I'm gonna go with Primo. But like, you don't need a lot. A very little bit goes a very long way. Like I said, I just don't like hearing all these coaches and stuff like that prescribing bikini girls like NPP. I've seen bikini girls being put on NPP. NPP is DECA. It's one of the harder steroids that you can take besides like Tren or methylated steroids. And a lot of females will get Anavar and they're actually taking D-ball because it's fake.
Oh yeah, it's very difficult to get Anavar, especially a legit one.
Well, you can get it from doctors.
Like, oh yeah, that's true.
Which people forget about. Like, it's an FDA legal in the US. It's FDA legal. Why do I know this? Because I'm starting to learn the actual FDA rules behind everything. So yeah, it is legal to get it from a doctor. So if you can, if you get a good endocrinologist or something like that, you can get prescribed it as long as they have a used case scenario for you.
Yeah, perfect. So that was all the questions that we had. Generally, what would you say you'd want to give people towards this? Like, because I think the general message that we want to do is to be able to educate people a lot more on these specific kind of topics to help reduce the abusive nature that goes on in competitive bodybuilding.
Okay, yeah. So usually less is more. In my experience, the better that you feel, the better your performance is going to be. So you want to take what you naturally could do and you want to enhance it. So if you're dieting extremely well, you're training extremely well, and you need to, if you want to take that notch up, then you take the notch up. But everything needs to be in check, because if you're not 100%, you can't take it to 110%. If you were 90%, it would have been like 95%, right? Like, so you're not even at your limitation yet. So the diet training needs to be in check. And then if you're feeling good because you're taking less and you're actually taking it for the enhancements reasons, then you're good. But if you're taking too much where your blood's going to get saturated and your blood's going to be thick, you're going to be feeling like crap, and blood dumping isn't going to immediately fix it overnight. So it puts stress on the organs. So over time, it does wear and tear down these organs. Another thing that I didn't touch on that I would love to touch on, but this would be another complete podcast, is gut distress from these steroids. It puts extreme amount of stress on the entire GI tract, pretty much top down to bottom, whether it's stomach acid or liver or kidney, down to the intestinal walls. So just that's something that people don't really talk about, because obviously they charge for their services to keep you healthy, which I do too. But needless to say,
in terms of like coaching and all that stuff, like we give out these information to sort of like give you guys a little bit of like what you can and can't do and kind of help you out. But I personally think if you want to get like the full totality of everything we just discovered, it's always good to just like hire us as one of your coaches. And that way we can control stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like Dave's really good with like drugs and stuff like that. He's probably just as good as with training as well. But he like has more info on this. Instead of going for somebody who looks like they're jacked and they have like 100,000 followers, why don't you just get somebody that's knowledgeable, that's actually generally cares about your health and wants you to perform? Like just because somebody has like 1 million followers doesn't mean they know what they're doing.
Yeah, like I actually and I'm not gonna like talk ill on the subject, but I had someone leave me recently because I cared about their health. Their blood work came back horrible. I knew exactly what it was. I told them how to treat the issue, and we started to address it. And they said there has to be an easier way, and they're no longer with me. And they took under me. They took third place at a pro show, and I prepped them in 5 weeks. And I pretty much I had to fix their health while doing it as well. So having a coach is going to be very hands-on, very personable with you, I think is very important. That's not completely strung out from having 1 million athletes. That's not cookie cutting stuff. And usually the top coaches aren't cookie cutting stuff. They cookie cut a little bit, right? Because they have their own methodologies. But um, that is going to treat you and going to actually address your health concerns while you're going through it. I've seen a lot of these top coaches where they don't give you the holistic side of stuff, where they're keeping your organs in check and their GI tract and your joints and your mental state, which are things that you can address through holistic supplementation. And that's been a big gap that I've seen in this industry with coaching, is the actual mental side effects that people are getting from these drugs and
Just
the
competing.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. We're gonna try to do a little bit more of this in the future. Maybe different subject instead of just PEDs, cover something else. I personally like doing this. I think David likes doing this as well. And if it helps educate people, we're gonna keep on doing it. So for that, if you stay, thanks for listening. Greatly appreciate it.